Welcome to Quiet Before. I'm excited to be in conversation with somebody that I am really honored to know, someone that I think is very brave and kind and unique as an artist and an activist. I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity to hear about a groundbreaking event that they founded. So we're just going to start. Rohan, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Rohan Zhou Lee. My pronouns are they, them. I also take AJ, Sha, and Ta. My other pronouns. I am a community organizer based in the land of the Lenape-Hoking, otherwise known as New York City. I am a dancer, writer, community organizer, and thanks to Nancy, a public speaker. Thank you for having me back. It's really wonderful to be here.
That was the first time we met was at the inception of Quiet Before in 2021. And it was because Kalayan and I had a meeting about how he was going to be on one of the panels. Right before we got out of our meeting, I said, we're going to be doing one of the panels looking at the future. Do you perchance know anyone who is like a really exciting activist? And that's when Kalayan connected us. Maybe Kalayan sent me an Instagram live that you did. It was around Blasian.
Yes, we were doing a couple of those way back when we were starting off with Blasian March. And then I know my dear friend Charmaine, who founded Militantly Mixed podcast, also invited me on to talk about Blasian March. That was the impetus of all the things.
We want to get to Blasian March, but before that, can you talk about where you were at before leading up to Blasian March?
Before Blasian March, I actually moved here to New York City from Chicago in 2018. Funny story because I was fired from my day job because I decided to just keep going to New York to audition. But then I also landed a regional dance gig doing West Side Story. So I wound up moving here for dance, really. I was trying my best, had a few gigs here and there. I had an off Broadway musical debut, and then the pandemic arrived and threw everything out of whack. That time period, I decided to try my best to stay in shape, but also being a writer of science fiction and fantasy, it was also a time when I also wrote a book. I wrote a whole fantasy novel, and that is another amazing adventure that's for another time. Leading up to Blasian March, it was after the murder of George Floyd and what we now know to be the mass increase of anti-Asian violence in the States. And so I found myself being of mixed race, trying to figure out how do I plug into both? How do I bring both together? On one hand, there was a lot of like anti-blackness in some of the Asian organizing spaces. So that became relatively toxic for me, factually toxic for everybody. But for me, it was like, I cannot be in this space. There was some queer phobia I also experienced as well from some certain organizers. And then I noticed on the BLM side, there were just so many offshoots of Black Lives Matter, which I thought was a better way to honor the roots, given that it was founded by three Black women, Samantha Juice Colors and Alicia Garza. There would be like the Black Women's March, and there would be the Black Disabled Lives Matters. There was Stonewall for the Black queer and trans community, but there wasn't anything for Black Asians. Speaking from personal experience, within the Black diaspora, arguably we are one of the most invisibilized. I feel like for sure within the Asian community, we always talk about invisibilization, but I feel that very similarly in the Black community because there is, this overarching, or in the words of Toni Morrison, master narrative about the Black experience. The master narrative for me has always been that all Black people have a certain experience on this stolen land, which of course for me, whose experience is part that, but it's also part the Filipino diaspora, how folks wound up in the Caribbean thanks to colonization, or my Chinese roots, how that is also very fractured across trade to the Caribbean, migration here to the States during the Chinese exclusion era. I also noticed at a lot of BLM rallies that I went to, several leaders would be like, oh, thanks to our white allies, Latino allies for coming out. And like the Asians were never mentioned. And I'm looking looking around and there's Asians on safety, there's Asians on walkie-talkies doing all the logistics and food stuff. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't help. This is not bringing us towards liberation when we are organizing in silos like this. Like we can't organize in a way that is allegedly for our freedom, but also participating in the exact same practices that keep us oppressed. We cannot talk about liberation without being in solidarity and moving forward with like, okay, if I'm here for Black liberation, how can I also be here for Asian freedom? They have to come at the same time, not just because our struggles have the same adversary, which is the colonial state, white supremacy, but also like Black Asians exist, like me. Therefore, Black Asians matter. If you're not uplifting all Black people in a Black Lives Matter movement space, then we have a problem. So Blasian March, we started just partially my healing process from all of that I was noticing or experiencing. We started October 11th, 2020. Multiple fun facts was National Coming Out Day. It's also smack dab in the middle of Filipino American History Month. Unfortunately, it's also the anniversary of the murder of the trans Filipina Jennifer Laude. For folks who don't know, she was a trans woman who was killed by the US Marine Michael Pemberton in the Philippines. His defense was basically a panic defense. He argued that, well, I killed her because I didn't know she was trans. Also, fun fact, I did not know until much later, where we traditionally have held Blasian March, which is Camin Plaza, that was also historically the first Filipino neighborhood in Brooklyn. I was like, okay, didn't know that. Some spirits called me to that area, and here we are.
What was your day job?
Ooh, I was doing marketing for nonprofits. I was doing marketing for specifically a theater company. But before that, I was doing marketing for a music foundation in Chicago. Funnily enough, I think the things I learned have definitely like transitioned into Blasian March organizing, like the way I like quote unquote market an event, the way I'm like, okay, like a theater company that has a main stage season, I can only do X amount of events per year before I'm like, I'm done, I'm tired. It's culminated.
But your passion was ballet, was dance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel an affinity for marketing?
No. At the time, it was like, this is a day job I can do. I have a writing background. I can figure it out. At some point, I was like, okay, maybe I do like this. But nowadays, I'm like, absolutely not.
I mean, you know that since 2021,
Yeah.
I've been working with theaters on their audience development. It's a very different experience for me because they bring me on because they really want to bring communities in that don't have access to theater. I don't have to sell tickets. And if a theater company has brought me on to sell tickets, I usually don't work with them. So the ones that I do work with genuinely want to connect to community, but I work with the marketing departments. It's such a hard like
Balance.
slog, but it is a very specific way of thinking. And I do think that everything you do is very clear. The way you create and put forward your vision is very clear. And I think probably why you have so much success and so much good feeling around your events and understanding. How many marches have there been since 2020?
After that, we collaborated with several women of color for the End the Violence Towards Asians rally, our first Blasian Pride, the Black Asian Trans Power rally, which happened in both New Haven and then later in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Blasian Pride #2, Blasian March Chicago, Blasian Pride #3. Yes, Blasian March Sacramento. That's about 10 actions.
My family attended one at Cadman Plaza. As a curator, the way you bring speakers together and the way you form a program, you're bringing a lot of people in a way and together that wouldn't normally be together, I feel.
Yeah.
And you present a very unique program that I think is very forward looking. Can you describe what you think that is?
It's a blending of political movements and political struggles. Because as you said, a lot of people would not be in this space learning about other experiences had they not been explicitly invited to come, right? Like, and that was the issue I see so often in so many of our spaces. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a BLM rally and people will be like, well, where are the Asians? I'm like, well, some Asians would like to give y'all space to do your thing. and support in the background, support from a distance. Unless there is an explicit calling of the people are not going to come. Even in certain Asian political spaces where we consistently have to talk about and then unpack the assumption that Black people are the main perpetrators of our violence, which is an ongoing conversation, which of course has been debunked by so many institutions. It's a lot of me going out into the community and seeing other organizations, building community with all of them, and then saying, hey, I'd love for us all to come together and just have this space. And for me, it is one of the most critical points of abolition that we are not acknowledging, because once again, we've been taught this master narrative of what is abolition. We only view abolition in the context of the prison industrial complex without thinking about, well, if abolition in its purest form is just the removal of structures that are harmful to us, that can take on many things. Like for me, like instituting Asian American history in education, that is abolition. We are abolishing structures that are erasing Asian Americans and Asian America. So with Blasian March, for me, it's like I want to abolish the divisions between our communities that were instituted during the late 60s by white supremacy. It's this division between our communities is actually relatively modern, that I think a lot of people don't know about. Like model minority was instituted after a large wave of Japanese Americans joined the Black liberation movement during civil rights era. So like this is very clearly like the impact of such propaganda is this long-term new white mythology that we are or have always been constantly at odds with each other. So for me, it's like, can I bridge these two communities in a way that abolishes our misunderstandings, abolishes our expectations of the other? And from then, can I bring us in to then think about not of us as the other, but as the similar? So that looks like food. That looks like, as you saw, music and dance. It looks like creating a joy-based organizational space, as opposed to one that is rooted in anger. And of course, organizing in anger has its place. And I applaud organizers who can focus through anger-based and rage-based organizing. I cannot. I'm a little too empathic for that. But if I can help us anchor each other in this moment of joy against all the white mythologies, against our peoples, I think that is one of the most important things I do at Blasian March.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
For people who haven't been to Blasian March, can you describe one of the action speakers that really are emblematic of what you would like to continue to accomplish with the event? It doesn't mean that it's your favorite.
Right.
I don't want you to pick favorites.
So one would definitely be in Los Angeles. For starters, I had no say in the curating of the program. That was all done by the LA chapter lead and founder organizer, lead painter Kim. Amazing academic intellect, very rooted in abolition thinking. I love the way they organize. And there was this Black trans woman singer who did a whole performance to pay tribute to, I think it was Freddie Mercury. It was some queer icon, but it was just it just rocked me to the core. This is amazing. I love it. It was incredible. Another one that I remember was Blasian March Chicago. Also, I had no selection or curation. That was all done by the lead organizer, Kate Venturina, also amazing Filipino-American queer organizer, just absolutely spectacular work she does. And there was this theater company called Circa Pintig. They were the first Filipino theater company in Chicago that actually I have some roots with. I've written a play or two for them. And they did a whole piece on gun violence. It was a bunch of actors playing mothers. Because the stories were so fluid, it didn't matter which mother's race was which. It was really about the biggest issue, which is gun violence is taking all of our lives. And then they ended with a tribute to it was one of the shootings in upstate New York where the gunner was targeting specifically Black people.
It was like a grocery store,
yes.
or yeah.
That one. They specifically paid tribute to those people who were lost. It was moving. It was moving to see that. And then I think one of my favorite moments here in New York. I love how you ask for speakers. I'm giving out the art moments. There's such deep power in art. Like art is the things that people can latch onto. Art is really what can politically move a people. But here in New York last year for our Blasian Pride, it was climate justice themed. And so all the speakers were, as usual, Black, Asian, Blasian, talking about how here in New York City, policies are impacting our climate. So we had speakers talking about the pipelines being built in Brooklyn to the mega jail being built in Chinatown. And then we had this queer, trans, Korean drumming ensemble. I started crying a little bit because they started playing and dancing around these Afro and Indo Caribbean trans people for waving their pride flags. It was beautiful because like these are the moments where I have no control. I have given this vision to the people and the people have taken it forward. The people have evolved the idea beyond my expectations, which I 1,000% always appreciate. And I'm always just like, wow, solidarity is always here. It's just we need to give ourselves permission to access it and
Mm.
engage the concept.
I think that's true, but I think it also has to be facilitated
Absolutely. Absolutely.
by a clear motivation or vision. It has to start from something that is well intentioned for it to become something beautiful. What is the structure of Blasian March?
Every chapter has been different. Some chapters, they just do one action, like, okay, I think we're going to shut down. That's fine. Maybe that was always meant to be, and it can always come back. Some folks are really going into academia. Some folks are organizing every other year. Like the LA team, they're only doing it every 2 years. That's totally fine. Each group has their own autonomy as long as we are still like within the mission statement
Do you meet regularly?
as needed. I know we've been talking about doing more regular meetings, but life.
Also, that might be the quickest way to ruin something.
Sometimes I'm kind of like, let these people run their own thing. Come back to me when you need like support or like feedback.
You take responsibility for New York actions and events.
Correct.
Do you have a strong support system here?
Growing, for sure, growing. I know now that we've really tapped into like the publishing and literary industry, there's been a lot more support.
In terms of planning and execution, do you have support that way?
To an extent, for the literary industry, we actually shifted about 3 years ago. We still have protests, but we shifted more into education access. So
Mhm.
3 years ago, we launched our book fair program where we give out free books from Black and Asian and Blasian writers. We also include Native literature because we are on stolen land, and so land back. But it's been really interesting seeing how a lot of people are really excited about the book fair. A lot of publishing houses have been donating books. A lot of folks who are in the book scene here have been really, really helpful. In terms of like planning things out, surprise, surprise, most of the labor falls onto the Black femme, which is me. But I know for like things like our Pride rally, usually I will do like a call for committees. This year, now that we're fiscally sponsored, which has been such a great, just huge foundation and just grounding the Blasian March. I mean, personally, I do not want to go into the nonprofit sector any further, but thanks to the National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Alliance, having that fiscal sponsorship has been just a great anchor and being like, okay, like this is no longer on my shoulders. I'm no longer legally liable to like manage all that. But yeah, it depends on the action.
Have you been getting grants and support that way?
Yeah, so for the book fair, we did wonderfully receive a micro grant from the Asian American Arts Alliance this year to finance our books. We also got a sponsorship from Apisha Health Community Center. So that was really wonderful. And it's been great knowing that that's been able to open up some doors for us. I know in 2022, I was also a member of the Bandung residency, which is a
Yeah.
collaboration between A4 and the Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora and Arts, which basically using art to build Black Asian solidarity. So they also helped co-sponsor Blasian Pride that year, which was migration justice themed. I got a check too. I was like, oh, I get to be paid to organize? This is new. Like,
In that effort, can you share what book fair is?
I guess for me, the book fair definitely started off as just okay, I'm looking at the protest numbers. Numbers are going down. You know, the economy was opening back up. People were going back to work. Black Asian solidarity was no longer a trending topic. Even though it has been a trending topic, it just hasn't been framed that way because it does not necessarily, because the topics don't necessarily involve East Asians. So like after the hijab police killing of Gina Amini, whom the Iranian government have named Masa, that was also a moment of Black Asian solidarity. And of course, nowadays, with the ongoing ISIS genocide in Palestine, that is also Black Asian solidarity. But once again, we're not framing it that way because it's not directly involving East Asians, which is another conversation. But for me, I was just like, okay, what else can I do to engage the community that still has, you know, it's the root in education that brings me joy, because for a lot of things I do, it's like if it doesn't bring me joy, I'm not doing it. Especially as a volunteer, absolutely not. Another major component was accessibility. You know, protests are by nature will be inaccessible to somebody. So how about something stationary? And for me, being a writer and knowing how books have really framed the way I've built Blasian March, I was like, oh, let's just give out books. So much of Blasian March, the protests, I wanted every action to be free. Because for me, it's like every action should be a snapshot of the reality you want to see. And I want to see the abolition of money. So, like, obviously, we have to fundraise to make it happen.
I
But
love you.
because I want to see the abolition of money in this temporary bubble. Can the people experience the abolition of money? Can the people experience the abolition of these racial divisions? What does that look like? So for me, I was like, okay, free food, free healthcare, free resources. Like literally every event will always have like contraception, personal safety items, and it's all free. And then I was like, yeah, we should have free books because the people deserve access to education. They deserve access to books. And I say that in a country that is riddled with book bans, that is also being riddled with budget cuts to libraries, budget cuts to education. So we're seeing how on both sides of the political spectrum, there is a reduction of access to books, reduction of access to knowledge, a reduction of access to political thinking. So the books are all free. Of course, the reality is we have to fundraise to make those books free. So we fundraise and then buy the books so that everyone can have access to free books. And also for me, I'm thinking about the reality of just income inequities, especially in both Black and Asian communities. As we now have learned, you know, Asian Americans now have the highest rates of poverty in the state of New York, which completely fractures the model minority myth. And I'm sure parents and families are worried about bills, feeding the kids, getting the kids clothes for school, like books are probably like on the bottom of the list. It's just the unfortunate reality of our society. So for me, it's really important that I have like free books for kids, you know, like kids should have books, like end of story. So beyond that, we also have coloring pages designed by one of our collective members, Kalani Van Meter. They're of Black, Asian, Indigenous, civil rights figures. There's like QR codes on them. So like while you're drawing the claim page, you can scan the QR code and learn more about these people. We have also had like kids programming, like flower crown making. There was drag story hour a few times. We've also had like community safety trainings at the book fair through a lens of Black Asian solidarity. And of course, we're in our third year, so we're still like figuring out which programs like tick with the community. But definitely we have a performance hour. So similar to like the Blasian Pride, as you saw, Nancy, we have performances of Black, Asian, Blasian, Indigenous, mixed race artists. And then it ends with our writing and solidarity panel. And it's a conversation about how we as writers build solidarity, or how do we as writers empower our communities to advocate for ourselves. It's been an amazing series of moments. Every panel has just been spectacular. I've always just been amazed at the perspectives and people coming through. It's a program that last year went to Sacramento for the first time. So that was pretty awesome. And yeah, this year it's going to Los Angeles and Orlando.
I know the book fair is at ISS. Have you done book fairs within schools?
We've been in conversation to have that. That's definitely been on the table. But thus far, we've had children's pop-up book fairs with diverse streets initiatives in Queens. We've also done the kids book fair twice now with the Bronx Night Market before it closed. This year, we were fortunate enough to work with the New York Public Library at their Chinatown location. But yeah, I'm always hoping to do this in a much more accessible way.
So at Dash's school, they have a week-long book sale, and all the families donate books. And then the kids are given money on the day of, and books are either $1 or $2. If kids don't have money, if they forget to bring money or anything like that, it doesn't, they actually can still take books. The whole point is, so that they're choosing their own books. I'm sure other schools have similar programs. It would be so easy to plug in Blasian Book Fair as part of these programs that schools do, the DOE or ISAGNI.
This is also just a part of the Blasian Mars that needs a little bit of growth. We are still trying to build with families, build with like youth. So like oftentimes the kids section is not as picked out, whereas like the adult section is like gone by the end of the day. And I'm like, okay.
Along those lines, having that kind of opportunity at schools for parents, I think, is really kind of key because
Agreed.
a lot of times kids are learning things in school that their parents, they're learning about solidarity, they're learning about allyship in a way that parents didn't get a chance to learn, or they can't support their kids in that learning and they have to educate themselves. I wanted to go back a little bit because again, you're a dancer and that's a big part of your life. In terms of your activism, where did that start? How do those two things live in you?
I definitely started dance when I was 18, so pretty late in life. Well, late in dance career, US standards of dance career, whatever that means. My degree in university is in ethnomusicology. Now that I'm seeing like the culminary experiences, I'm seeing where it all starts. So back in college, I used my degree to study like dances from different cultures, quote unquote non-Western cultures, cultures of my roots and my heritage, and then combining that with my ballet training. Eventually, back in 2016, I choreographed this solo called Homage. It's a ballet that pays tribute to Asian Americans who have died because of police brutality. It premiered actually at the Asian American Performing Arts Festival back in 2016 with Eighth Grade Theater in Chicago, a theater company that focuses on Asian American stories. For the longest time, I tried to keep these things separate, because especially dance world is very quick to blacklist dancers who are too outspoken, dancers who challenge your director or say something about like this is not okay with me. And we as dancers are so conditioned to think, okay, your career is so short, you just gotta like deal with it, smile, be quiet, get the check, go, keep those connections because you never know who can help you down the road in your career. So eventually it did take for me to begin to mold these things more deeply together when Black Lives Matter started. And when I first read Carlos Bulosan's America's in the Heart, those two things for me happened almost at the exact same time. Like I was introduced to that book via a Filipino alumni group at one of our holiday parties around like maybe a few months after Black Lives Matter was founded. And so for me, it became more of like I'm beginning to realize, okay, as a dancer of color in this industry, my existence is already a protest as it is. My existence is already an act of revolution as it is. And I still hold those values. But, over time, when it became, okay, I'm a dancer of color, but I'm still having to dance through a white narrative, a white lens. And while some white choreographers, I love what they're doing, they're trying to be as anti-racist as possible. At the end of the day, if you look at the aggregated data of hiring, 10% of jobs still go to Black people. I think it's like 3% of jobs per year go to Asians, and like less than 1% go to Native Americans. So I'm just like, okay, this is not fully serving me in an industry that still will not affirm who I am. I think for me, it finally really clicked where I want to bring the two more explicitly together back in 2022. I was reading some of my poems for a fundraiser for the Philippine Human Rights Act. And someone who was there was like, so I am an organizer in Switzerland. Do you want to come perform some of your poetry there? And I was like, absolutely. But then on top of that, it was just a light bulb moment in my head. I was like, of all the dreams that kind of died in the dance industry, because racism and because ageism, like literally some ballet companies, I would audition for them and they would write back to me. Like one company in particular wrote back to me twice, 2 years in a row, and would say, "We're very interested in hiring you, but we want to know your date of birth." I was like, "That's age discrimination." Like, and the same company asked me this 2 years in a row. A couple of years later, I was also training at another ballet company that was historically Black. One of the instructors told me I did not identify with the Black community. It was definitely a moment where I told my mother, I was like, I have never felt more Asian in my life. So even like within these spaces, the dreams of being into a company began to like wither and die. Continuing to be in this space began to like lose value to me. If that ever happens again, amazing. If not, listen, you had an off-Broadway debut, honey. So for this festival in Switzerland, the last dream I was like hanging on to, I was like, can I dance a piece out here at this festival? And they said absolutely. I reimagined Homage. I remixed it and I brought it back and it premiered in Switzerland. And we had this talk back after the piece was done. Folks were saying things like, we had no idea that police violence also is an Asian American experience. And I'm sitting here like, well, yeah, model minority is built on the erasure of racism towards Asians. White supremacy relies on Asian America not knowing these stories, even as they happen in real time. So it really hit me a few months later when I checked in with people, say, hey, how's it going? And I learned that folks there were building this cross-racial coalition and they're trying to do like a monthly gathering to talk about experiences with racism. And for me, it was like, I clearly did not create this, but it was wonderful to know that my ballet piece, by being a part of this festival, was part of the genesis of this cross-racial coalition. And that's just really stuck with me. And I am at a point where it's like, I want to do more of that. I want to create and dance more pieces that directly speak to my activism. Because
Mm.
I mean, looking at the dance field, there's not really any work. Well, there are some like Black Iris Project, but I'm looking at like, say, major institutions of dance. How many of them are going to ever do a ballet about Black Lives Matter? I hope that happens. That'd be amazing. Like Blasian March, I feel like there's this gap that's missing. Back to the nonprofit brain. I'm seeing how like so many like of these major institutions are struggling with tapping in with younger audiences, as you can definitely speak to, Nancy. I mean, a lot of them are not politically aligned. Like, how many of them made like a one statement about Black Lives Matter and then did nothing about reparations for Black people in the dance field? That's where my dance career wants to go.
Do you think that dance is always going to be a big part of your expression and communication?
I believe so, predominantly because I found this out a while ago. My grandmother was a Black ballerina during Jim Crow era.
Wow.
She was at the Virginia State College for Negroes. The name has been immensely updated. I forget the new name of it right now, but yeah, she was a Black ballerina. And for me, engaging in ballet and other forms of movement has been a way to like honor her legacy, to honor this like unknown story of Black resistance through classical art, Western classical art, I should say.
Do you have video from when you did homage and no
Sadly,
video?
so I asked them to record it, but they didn't do it. But like it was, I think for them it was also a pivot because Swiss organizing, they do not record. They organize very differently.
But you must have recorded it.
I have been able to record snippets of rehearsals, but getting like a fully produced production of it, not yet.
I want to look at the future. The past 5 years for
Yeah.
you have been filled with a frenzy of expression and
Yeah.
creation.
Yeah.
And also, building your community and building allyship and learning and all of that. I would love to hear, as somebody who quite before is like a passion thing, it's just
Mm.
a side thing that is really important to me because I want to capture the stories that I'm exposed to. That's my way of trying to help tell our history. But there are all kinds of things that you run into when you think about how to capture these stories. One of those things that I think comes up a lot is the passing down of stories and connecting generations and benefiting from experience before that experience is lost. As we talked about, your vision is very forward thinking. Are there challenges that you have specifically run into in terms of older generations being willing to share knowledge, or like what those barriers might be? And then on the other end, what do you think about young organizers? How are they overcoming the barriers that we've had in the past?
Well, two things first. I will definitely throw some flowers at Quiet Before. I love what you said about documenting, telling our stories, because we live in a society that is so built on the erasure of Asian America and all other marginalized people that it's critical that we, I forget who said this, a Black feminist organizer, but we have to create evidence of our existence. And Quiet Before is one of those pieces of evidence for our existence. So I appreciate that. I also should backtrack a little bit. Swiss organizing, the what I saw, documentation was just a little different. It was not the live streams that we're used to. It was not like the videoing everything, photographing everything. Like at some actions, there were no photographers as there are here. So it's just a different way of documenting. I would say, I guess, oral documentation. Like people tell each other stories about what happened. Okay, so generations. I have to remind myself of something that one of the organizers in Sacramento told me, with the Asian American Liberation Network when we collaborated for the Blasian March out there in Sacramento last year. She said that, like, in a meeting, that the elders have been waiting generations for this, which was like my whole heart. Like, but like, and some, for some folks, yes, that's absolutely true. I think for a lot of folks who had the lived experience of witnessing Black Asian solidarity from the civil rights era, Black Asian solidarity during the LA uprisings, where a lot of the media created this white mythology of Black Korean tension, which was true, but also like put it in the context of propaganda that was fueling tension, put it in the context of there was Black Asian solidarity happening at the same time. I'm seeing how a lot of elders are very excited, and because they're so established, they know how to help and they know exactly how to help. Where I'm sitting here like, we need, and then someone's like, bet, got you. I was like, thank you, elder. I think one of my favorite moments was when, I guess I call her an elder. Her name is Ako Sensei. She is the only female professor I think the only female professor to begin with, but she's the only woman on the council at the University of Tokyo. I actually met her last year at this photo exhibit where I was being featured for being queer and Caribbean. And she was like, you should come to Japan and speak. And I was like, okay, that worked out. Like, she had the authority, had the resources, understood how important it is to lift stories like this. I was already planning on traveling to Japan as it was. To have the experience of being able to talk about my work, my activism in Tokyo, and then to meet so many other organizers there. I love that the elders also know how to connect people. Like they see people's patterns and know how to connect people. When I was in Tokyo, I was able to meet Hong Kong activists who are in exile because of what the Chinese government is doing. I met so many younger organizers who are really organizing around marriage equality in Japan. One definite challenge that I am constantly checking myself on as I meet younger organizers is, I think a lot of elders sometimes, because they have organized in such a specific way, it's hard to break the mold or like weave out of that and try something new. There have been so many I come across who are so mired in anti-Asian or anti-Black sentiment. And because maybe that's a lived experience, maybe it's the propaganda from US media they've been consuming, there have been definitely a couple where I was like, I cannot work with this person. I know in both cultures I come from, it's all about respecting the elders, honoring their stories, but if their perspective is harmful to me, then no, we're not doing this. And then with younger organizers, I appreciate their imagination. So many things that happened in LA, in Chicago, the New Haven team, like none of that was me. All of that was students, Gen Zers being like, okay, they grew up or came of age in a time period where Black Asian solidarity was so tumultuous. So to see them take that and then like build upon it, make something different, make something, in many ways, make things a little better than what I initially envisioned. Because sometimes I'll go to like a Blazers March in Los Angeles and it's such an LA event. Like the food trucks, the state team are all on skateboards. Oh, like, this is so Los Angeles. Like I'm here for it.
But you mean that they improve, that it's better how?
It's not what I imagined, but the core is still there, the concise, clear vision, and it becomes their own story, which I love. Both you and I are talking about storytelling all the time, and I feel like, especially with Blasian March, if your story is not part of the action, you're not going to remember it. If you're not directly experiencing Black Asian joy, you're not going to remember it, or it's not going to be as monumental an experience. If you're not experiencing like different foods from different cultures and letting that help erode your expectations or misunderstandings of the other community. It has to be like a wonderful grounding lived experience. And so to see these younger folks put their own experiences and make their own spin out of it, I think is just absolutely beautiful.
Do you see with like Gen Z or Alpha that there is like a very natural allyship between the Black and Asian community? Like, is it easier than what you've experienced? Is it easier than what the
Mm.
generation before, not including activists who have been doing this for decades?
I'll definitely limit my answer with this only my experience. I definitely think the younger generation, because they've had access to information much more quickly than like our generation or your generation had. Millennials, we had to unlearn a lot of stuff. Whereas for Gen Z,
Mm.
I've given presentations on Black Asian history in high schools and stuff. And some of the kids already knows information. Like I just gave a workshop at Oberlin College, and the kids like, oh, we already know this. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, some things the kids did not know. Like for example, some kids did not know about the Dalit Panthers, which was the like South Asian iteration of the Black Panthers, and that was their attempt to like abolish caste in their society. So that was wonderful. But like, yeah, a lot of them already know this stuff. This is also the power and the beauty, I guess, of when you were saying passing the legacy down. One of my friends, he is a science teacher at a high school in Chicago. And a couple of years ago, he like messaged me and he was like, just so you know, the kids are forming a Black Asian student alliance and they're using Blasian March photos. And I was like, what? It's wonderful to know that we've been able to use certain strategies to disrupt the ongoing attempt at dividing our communities. I think that's wonderful. I think that the current major tensions I'm seeing right now is with our policymakers and how they are still attempting to like create these divisions between us. But yeah, the kids are gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
No, thank
Uh,
you.
when so much is happening and other people won't realize this when they're watching, but yesterday was tax day. So I appreciate you so much because this was amazing. And as always, I wish you all the luck, all the, I don't know what that saying is, a wind at your sails. And
Thank you.
you always have my dedication and support. And I'm so happy that we were able to just at least like take this little snapshot of where you are. And I hope that we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again, Nancy, for everything. For all the listeners, I will forever credit my public speaking career to this woman. So
That was going to happen anyway.
nothing but
Okay.
gratitude to you, Nancy. Yeah.
Always.